Have you ever felt a subtle unease after a conversation? A feeling that you agreed to something you didn't quite want, or that your emotions were steered in a direction not entirely your own? This invisible current, this unseen hand guiding your choices and feelings, is often the work of manipulation. It's a pervasive force in our world, sometimes overt, but more often it's a whisper, a shadow play in our interactions. We navigate a world where influence is constantly exerted. But when does influence cross the line into manipulation? And how can we arm ourselves against its more corrosive forms? Carl Jung, a pioneer of depth psychology, offered profound insights into the human psyche, insights that can illuminate these darker corners of human interaction. He believed that true freedom comes from self-knowledge. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This very sentiment is key to understanding how we can become susceptible to manipulation, and more importantly, how we can break free. This journey we are about to embark on is not just about recognizing manipulation in others, it's about discovering the parts of ourselves that might unknowingly invite it. We will explore 6 crucial understandings, rooted in Jungian thought, designed to transform you from a potential target into a consciously aware individual, capable of navigating the complexities of human relationships. With clarity and authentic strength, what if you could build an inner fortress, not of walls but of awareness, making you impervious to the subtle strings of manipulation? That is the promise we will explore, manipulation. It's a word that often conjures images of villains in films, twisting mustaches and elaborate schemes, but the reality, the kind we encounter daily, is far more mundane, and because of that, far more insidious. It's in the friendly advice that subtly steers you away from your own deeply felt goals, the news headline crafted to evoke a specific emotional outcry, rather than present balanced information, or the colleague who showers you with praise just before asking for a significant, inconvenient favor they know you'll feel obliged to grant. It's often a whisper, not a shout, a gentle nudge rather than a forceful shove. Carl Jung's profound explorations of the human psyche, while primarily focused on the journey towards individual wholeness, or what he termed individuation, provide us with powerful lenses to see these unseen influences. He taught that the unconscious holds immense power over our lives. Manipulation often operates by hijacking these unconscious processes, our unexamined assumptions and emotional triggers. Think of it like a current in a river. Sometimes it's strong and obvious, threatening to pull you under. But more often it's a gentle, almost imperceptible drift, and before you consciously realize it, you're far from your intended shore. Consider the sophisticated ways marketing attempts to shape our desires, often by tapping into unconscious needs for belonging, status, or security. Is all influence manipulation? Not necessarily. Healthy influence respects autonomy. But when influence seeks to exploit, to control for hidden, self-serving motives without your fully informed consent, it crosses a critical line. The first step, the absolute foundation upon which all other defenses are built, is to recognize its pervasiveness and its chameleon-like subtlety. It's not about becoming cynical or distrustful of everyone. It's about becoming discerning, about sharpening your perception. Jung stated, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." While he was speaking about projection, this can also apply to recognizing manipulative tactics. What feels off in an interaction can be a clue. Have you ever walked away from a conversation or even a news report feeling a strange sense of unease, a feeling that you've been subtly steered or emotionally leveraged but couldn't quite articulate how or why? That vague discomfort is often your intuition, your deeper self signaling that something was amiss, that an invisible thread was pulled. This initial recognition is crucial because, as Jung also observed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Acknowledging the subtle reality of manipulation around us is the first act of bringing a pervasive, often uncomfortable darkness into the light of awareness. Once we acknowledge that manipulation is a subtle and pervasive force, the next crucial step is to understand the mind of the manipulator. Not to excuse their actions, but to recognize the patterns and tactics they employ. These individuals often operate from a place of their own unacknowledged wounds or a deep-seated need for control. but their methods of psychological exploitation are remarkably consistent. They become adept at identifying and leveraging the psychological hooks in others. Think of tactics like gaslighting, where your reality is systematically denied or distorted until you begin to doubt your own sanity. You're imagining things that never happened, or you're being too sensitive, are common refrains designed to erode your confidence in your perceptions. Then there's guilt tripping, a potent tool that plays on your empathy and sense of responsibility. A manipulator might say, "After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me," making you feel indebted and obliged to comply with their wishes, even if those wishes are unreasonable or detrimental to you. Love bombing is another insidious tactic, an overwhelming display of affection and attention at the beginning of a relationship, only to be withdrawn later, creating a desperate craving for its return and making you more susceptible to control. This often works in tandem with intermittent reinforcement, where kindness is doled out unpredictably, keeping you hooked and hoping for the next fix. Carl Jung's work on the shadow, those parts of ourselves we repress or deny, is particularly relevant here. He wrote in Psychology and Alchemy, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality." While manipulators themselves often fail to confront their own shadows, they become experts at sensing and exploiting the unacknowledged or vulnerable aspects in others. Perhaps your fear of abandonment, your desire for approval, or your difficulty setting boundaries. They might project their own negative traits onto you, accusing you of being selfish or deceitful when, in reality, they are the ones exhibiting these behaviors. Jung observed, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." When we feel intensely irritated or confused by someone's accusations, it might be a sign that projection is at play. Consider a scenario. A friend consistently borrows money but rarely repays it. When gently reminded, they might launch into a tirade about their own hardships, making you feel guilty for even asking, or they might subtly imply you're being petty and ungenerous. They are exploiting your compassion and your potential discomfort with conflict. The manipulator often seeks power because, as Jung noted, where love rules there is no will to power, and where power predominates their love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. Their actions stem from a deficit, a void they try to fill by controlling others. Understanding these tactics isn't about labeling people, it's about recognizing behaviors that disempower and diminish. Have you ever felt like your emotional buttons were being expertly pushed by someone? What did that feel like? And in retrospect, can you identify the specific tactic that might have been used? Recognizing the game is the first step to refusing to play. Now that we've explored the pervasiveness of manipulation and the common tactics employed, we turn inwards. For if the manipulator seeks to pull strings, we must first understand what those strings are within ourselves. This brings us to the cornerstone of true resilience against manipulation, profound self-awareness. Carl Jung dedicated his life's work to the exploration of the inner world, emphasizing that the journey to wholeness or individuation is a journey of increasing consciousness. He famously stated, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." This isn't about blaming the victim. It's about recognizing that our unexamined vulnerabilities, our unacknowledged needs, and our unhealed wounds can inadvertently become the very access points that manipulators exploit. Think of it this way. A skilled puppeteer can only make a puppet dance if there are strings attached. Our vulnerabilities are those strings. What are some of these common internal vulnerabilities? Perhaps it's an overwhelming need for approval, stemming from early experiences where love felt conditional. A manipulator can easily play on this by offering praise and validation, only to withdraw it when you don't comply with their wishes. Or maybe it's a deep-seated fear of conflict, which leads you to agree to things against your better judgment, just to keep the peace. A manipulator quickly learns that raising their voice or creating tension will get them what they want from you. Jung spoke extensively about complexes, which he described as emotionally charged clusters of associations, thoughts, and memories residing in the personal unconscious. These complexes, often formed around unresolved experiences or archetypal themes, can be triggered by external situations, making us react in predictable, often unhelpful ways. For example, if someone has an unacknowledged inferiority complex, They might be highly susceptible to flattery that inflates their ego, or, conversely, easily crushed by criticism, making them eager to please to avoid further negative feedback. Our shadow aspects, those parts of ourselves we deem unacceptable and therefore repress, also play a crucial role. As Jung wrote in Psychology and the Unconscious, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. If we haven't acknowledged our own capacity for, say, anger or selfishness, we might be easily manipulated by someone who projects these qualities onto us, making us feel ashamed or defensive. For instance, if you pride yourself on being selfless, your persona or social mask, a manipulator might accuse you of being selfish for setting a boundary. If your selflessness is a core, unexamined part of your identity that masks a fear of being seen as bad, this accusation can be devastatingly effective. The process of identifying these vulnerabilities requires courageous self-honesty. It involves looking at past situations where you felt manipulated or compromised. Ask yourself what emotion was being targeted. Was it fear, guilt, a need for love, a desire to be seen as competent or kind? What underlying belief about yourself or the world made you susceptible in that moment? Consider the power dynamics in your relationships. Are there people around whom you consistently feel drained, anxious, or diminished? This could be a sign that your vulnerabilities are being subtly exploited. The goal here is not to eliminate our vulnerabilities. To be human is to be vulnerable. Rather, the goal is to bring them into conscious awareness. When you know where your sensitive spots are, you can better protect them. You can learn to recognize when someone is attempting to press those buttons and choose a different response. What is one personal fear or need that, if you're truly honest with yourself, might make you more susceptible to being influenced in a way that isn't truly aligned with your own best interests? This journey of self-discovery, of illuminating our own inner landscape, is what Jung considered the path to true psychological strength. Our susceptibility to manipulation isn't solely rooted in individual vulnerabilities. It's also deeply intertwined with the societal and familial conditioning we all undergo. From a very young age, we are subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, trained for a degree of submission, to prioritize harmony over authenticity, to defer to authority figures without question, and to value external validation above our own inner knowing. This conditioning creates fertile ground for manipulators. Carl Jung was keenly aware of the power of collective forces in shaping the individual psyche. While he focused on the collective unconscious as a repository of archetypes and universal human experiences, we can also see how collective cultural norms and family systems instill patterns of behavior that can leave us open to being controlled. Think about common childhood messages. Don't rock the boat. Be a good girl, boy. Children should be seen and not heard, or respect your elders even when they are disrespectful. These messages, while sometimes well-intentioned, can inadvertently teach us to suppress our own needs, opinions, and intuitive warnings in favor of pleasing others or avoiding disapproval. This learned behavior can persist into adulthood, making it difficult to say no or to assert boundaries, especially with those who remind us of past authority figures or who trigger old patterns of seeking approval. For example, if you were raised in a family where expressing anger was forbidden, you might struggle to assert yourself when someone is violating your boundaries, fearing a negative reaction or the loss of connection. A manipulator can exploit this by pushing your limits, knowing you're unlikely to push back forcefully. Jung's concept of the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world, is relevant here. He described the persona as a compromise between individual and society as to what a man should appear to be. Sometimes our conditioning leads us to over-identify with a particular persona: the nice guy, the dutiful daughter, the compliant employee. If our sense of self becomes too rigidly attached to this persona, we become vulnerable to manipulation that threatens to expose us as anything other than what we project. Imagine someone whose persona is built around being always helpful. A manipulative colleague might continually dump extra work on them, praising their helpful nature, while exploiting their inability to say no without feeling like they are betraying their own identity. Breaking free from this conditioning requires a conscious effort to deconstruct these ingrained patterns. It means questioning the shoulds and oughts that govern our behavior. Whose voice is it really that tells you you should always put others first, or that you must avoid conflict at all costs? Is it a voice that serves your genuine well-being, or is it an echo from the past, a relic of old training? Jung emphasized the importance of differentiating ourselves from collective expectations as part of the individuation process. He wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "The man who is not sufficiently anchored in his own essential nature is easily overpowered by the suggestive influence of the collective. This suggestive influence can manifest as societal pressure to conform, but it also describes how we internalize familial and cultural scripts that dictate how we should behave, scripts that manipulators can readily exploit. Consider a societal message that equates success with constant productivity. A manipulative boss might leverage this by praising your dedication while subtly demanding unpaid overtime, playing on your conditioned belief that you must always be on to be valuable. Breaking free is an act of psychological rebellion, a reclaiming of your authentic self from the layers of shoulds. What is one rule or expectation you learned growing up that you now realize might be making it harder for you to protect yourself from being taken advantage of? Recognizing these conditioned responses is the first step toward dismantling them and choosing a more authentic, self-directed path. Having journeyed through the landscapes of manipulation, our own vulnerabilities and the conditioning that shapes us, we arrive at a pivotal point, the cultivation of true freedom. This isn't merely the absence of external constraint. It is an internal state of authentic decision-making, guided by our deepest self. Carl Jung's entire body of work points towards this kind of freedom, achieved through the arduous but rewarding process of individuation, becoming an individual, a separate, indivisible unity or whole. Jung believed that authentic decisions arise from a connection with what he called the self, the regulating center of the psyche, a concept broader and deeper than the ego. He wrote in Mysterium Conjunctionis, "The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. To make decisions from this place of self, rather than from a place of fear, conditioned response, or the ego's desire for approval, is to achieve a profound level of personal sovereignty." So how do we foster this authentic decision-making? Firstly, it requires us to honor our intuition. Jung saw intuition as one of the four fundamental psychological functions, a way of perceiving possibilities and unconscious contents. He described it as a kind of instinctive apprehension, a knowing without knowing how one knows. When faced with a decision, especially one where you feel pressured or uneasy, what does that quiet inner voice, that gut feeling tell you? Learning to listen to and trust this intuitive faculty, even when it contradicts logic or external advice, is crucial. For example, you might be offered a seemingly perfect job, yet something feels off. Your intuition could be picking up on subtle cues about the work environment or the person offering the role that your conscious mind hasn't yet processed. Secondly, authentic decision-making involves integrating our shadow. As we've discussed, unacknowledged shadow aspects make us vulnerable. By consciously engaging with our shadow, our anger, our fear, our selfishness, our power, we reclaim the energy bound up in these repressed parts. This doesn't mean acting out these shadow qualities impulsively, but rather understanding them, accepting their existence within us, and learning to harness their energy constructively. For instance, acknowledging your capacity for anger can empower you to set firm boundaries rather than passively accepting mistreatment. Jung saw this integration as essential for wholeness. He stated, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When our decisions are informed by a more complete understanding of who we are, including our darker potentials, they are more robust and less susceptible to external manipulation." Thirdly, it involves a process Jung might relate to psychological alchemy, the transformation of base elements, our raw, unrefined emotions and impulses, into gold, conscious, integrated choices. This means pausing before reacting. When you feel triggered or pressured, instead of immediately complying or lashing out, create a space for reflection. Ask yourself, what am I truly feeling? What past experiences or conditioned beliefs are being activated right now? What outcome aligns with my deepest values, not just my immediate comfort or fear? Consider a scenario where a family member attempts to guilt trip you into a commitment you don't want to make. Instead of succumbing to the guilt, a conditioned response, or angrily refusing, a reactive response, you could pause, acknowledge the guilt, understand its origin, perhaps a desire to be a good family member, and then calmly and assertively state your decision based on your authentic needs and limits. This is the alchemical work of transforming a base emotional reaction into a conscious, self-respecting choice. True freedom, in a Jungian sense, isn't about always getting what we want, but about making choices that are in true alignment with our whole self, even when those choices are difficult or unpopular. What small step can you take today to connect more deeply with your intuition, or to consciously consider a decision from a place of wholeness rather than immediate reaction? This ongoing practice is the path to authentic living, making you far less a target for manipulation and far more the author of your own life. We have now navigated the complex terrain of manipulation, from recognizing its subtle forms to understanding our own inner landscapes that make us susceptible. The culmination of this journey is a profound transformation, moving from an unconscious puppet whose strings are pulled by external forces and unexamined internal patterns to a conscious strategist, actively and intentionally reclaiming the narrative of your own life. This isn't about becoming manipulative yourself. Rather, it's about becoming skillfully aware, discerning and empowered in your interactions and choices. Carl Jung emphasized that the goal of psychological development is to bring more of the unconscious into consciousness. He wrote, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. That is to say, when the individual remains undivided and does not become conscious of his inner opposite, the world must perforce act out the conflict and be torn into opposing halves. When we are unconscious of our vulnerabilities, our conditioning, or the manipulative tactics being used against us, we experience these things as fate, as things that just happen to us. We feel like victims of circumstance or of other people's actions. But as we become more conscious, as we integrate the insights we've explored, we shift from a reactive stance to a proactive one. We begin to see the patterns, both internal and external, and can therefore choose how to respond rather than simply react. Reclaiming your life's narrative means actively participating in its creation. It means understanding that while you cannot control everything that happens externally, you have significant agency in how you interpret events and how you choose to move forward. Jung's concept of the transcendent function is relevant here. He described this as a psychological process that arises from the tension between conscious and unconscious contents, leading to a new, more comprehensive attitude or understanding, a way to unite opposing tendencies within the psyche. When faced with a manipulative attempt, instead of simply succumbing one pole or aggressively fighting back another pole, the transcendent function allows for a third way, a response that is both assertive and grounded, self-respecting and perhaps even compassionate, but never complicit. Imagine someone tries to gaslight you, to deny your reality. The unconscious puppet might doubt themselves, internalize the distortion. The conscious strategist, however, recognizes the tactic. They can calmly state their perception, refuse to engage in an argument designed to confuse, and disengage from the interaction if necessary, thereby refusing to let their narrative be rewritten by another. This involves developing what we might call psychological discernment, the ability to see beneath the surface of interactions, to understand the underlying dynamics and motivations, both in others and in ourselves. It's like learning to read the subtext of life. For example, when a colleague showers you with excessive praise just before making an unreasonable request, the conscious strategist recognizes the pattern of ingratiation. They can accept the compliment gracefully, if they choose, but then evaluate the request on its own merits, without feeling unduly obligated by the flattery. This is not about cynicism, it's about clarity. Jung believed in the power of the individual to forge their own meaning and path. He wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." This powerful statement encapsulates the essence of moving from puppet to strategist. You are no longer defined solely by past hurts, conditioned responses, or others' attempts to control you. Instead, you actively choose who you are and how you will live, informed by self-awareness and guided by your authentic self. What is one area of your life where you feel your narrative has been more dictated by external pressures or old patterns than by your own conscious choices? And what is one small strategic step you can take, armed with the insights from our journey, to begin reclaiming that part of your story? This transformation is an ongoing process, a continual unfolding of consciousness. It is the ultimate act of self-liberation. Our journey through these 6 crucial understandings, from recognizing manipulation's subtle dance to reclaiming your life's narrative, has been an exploration into the depths of both human interaction and the inner self. We've seen how Carl Jung's profound insights into the unconscious, the shadow, the power of complexes, and the process of individuation provide not just a map, but also a compass for navigating a world where influence is ever present. This isn't about achieving a state of permanent, unshakable immunity, for to be human is to be in relationship, to be open to connection and therefore to a degree to influence. Instead, the goal has been to cultivate a robust inner awareness, a discerning mind and an authentic voice. It's about transforming your inner landscape so that manipulation finds little fertile ground in which to take root. The work of making the unconscious conscious, as Jung so often emphasized, is a lifelong endeavor. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to continually turn inward, to question, to reflect, and to grow. As Jung himself wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain, but through this committed inner work, you build an internal locus of control, a deep well of self-trust that becomes your greatest shield and your truest guide. You learn to recognize the whispers of your intuition, the wisdom of your integrated shadow, and the call of your authentic self. The path from unconscious puppet to conscious strategist is paved with these moments of awakening, these choices to respond rather than react, to define rather than be defined. Remember Jung's powerful assertion, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. By embracing these principles, by committing to this path of self-awareness and authentic decision-making, you are not just protecting yourself from manipulation, you are stepping more fully into that privilege, crafting a life that is a true reflection of your most genuine, conscious self. What will be your next conscious step on this ongoing journey of becoming?